You don't really think about style. You're always trying to find that kind of appropriate language is a good way of putting it. And I think that just kind of emerges as a style. It's not a kind of premeditated thing.
The past is more interesting, just in terms of telling a story. Who needs, you walk out the door and you're in contemporary New York, so who needs us for that?
Well, it's also, there's an exoticism to it, even if even if it's not romanticized or sentimentalized. It's a once upon a time thing.
It's immediately transporting. You're going somewhere.
The world is a horrible, unforgiving and capricious place, and it doesn't, conform to one's expectations or certainly, genre conventions.
Why do your movies look so good? Because we work with good DPs. It's also, why is the music so interesting in our movies? Because we work with really good musicians and composers.
I'm sure it's the same with you writing. You go like, yeah, what would be good next? And maybe part of it is because you've internalized some structural thing, but it's not like not like some target you're aiming for.
Was there any template? Like, I would think with a first featured script, there's helps to have some kind of guideline, like what happens in each of the 3 acts. I don't know how to do 3-act structure.
We don't either. I don't know what that is. I mean, I've heard of the 3 acts.
Yeah, I've heard of this, yeah.
Yeah, no, we just have proceeded by feel, sort of, beginning, where does it go? Seems like it's about time to wind it up.
I'm sure it's the same with you writing. You go like, yeah, what would be good next? And maybe part of it is because you've internalized some structural thing, but it's not like not like some target you're aiming for.
Violence in this movie, or violence generally for you guys. Is this something that you think? I mean, is it in every movie?
Well, it's a very violent. I mean, one of the things we said to Scott Rudin, one of the first things we sort of discussed with him when he sent us the book was, there's a lot of violence in the book, and it's very important, as there is in a lot of Cormac's novels, and it's very important to the story, and we couldn't conceive of sort of soft pedaling that in the movie and really doing anything resembling the book. Would have been nonsensical, and we wanted to make sure that Scott was on the same page with that. Of course he was. I mean, he wanted to make the book. He didn't want to make some sort of studio Hollywood version of No Country for Old Men. But it's about a character confronting a very arbitrary, violent, brutal world, and you have to see that. You see it in the story as it's written, and you have to see it in the movie in order to understand anything, I think, about what the characters are, what they're about, and what they're confronting, and what they're trying to make sense of.
Oh, it's shocking in the book as well that Josh's character, who seems to be kind of the main guy, gets killed off stage, as it were, in the book, and not even by the bad guy, whom he doesn't even get to meet, but by some nameless schmoes. But why is that, or why did that appeal to us? It's like although it's kind of shocking and unconventional, especially in a movie, maybe even more so than a novel, it seems, it's connected to what the story is about, which is, the world is a horrible, unforgiving and capricious place, and it doesn't, conform to one's expectations or certainly, genre conventions. And that's,
And you get to experience what violence truly is, which is a sudden, subtraction of somebody. And I haven't seen that in film. I think that's extremely unique and risky. I heard of a guy who actually thought, he said he thought that 3/4 of the movie was a masterpiece, and the last quarter after it finished, he went outside and he started kicking things.
It is interesting from a storytelling point of view, too, and it was to us what Ethan was saying about the sort of it's sort of conforming to the sort of ideas in the book and the sort of capricious nature of the world, and how the story sort of reflects that, and that shift reflects that, is sort of what was interesting to us. But in addition to that, it was interesting to us in reading the book that you do follow the movie through, or you follow the novel through, because it's much the same, the novel and the movie, with following this one character and sort of investing in this character, and you believe the movie is about this character, and the outcome is going to take a trajectory that you're more or less familiar with. And Cormac, you know, he changes that 3/4 of the way through, and what he does is he makes you then sort of think, well, if it's not what I thought it was about, what is it about? And I think that's what the last third of the story in the novel sort of tells you, and that's what we were trying to do in the movie as well.
I mean, the question you guys must get all the time, I have to ask you this. So many of your movies are set in the past. More than half of them, as a matter of fact. What is it about? But they're all very anti-nostalgic looks at the past.
Yeah. Yes to both. I agree. Yes. Why is that? I don't know. The past is more interesting. I don't know. Just in terms of telling a story, who needs, you know, you walk out the door and you're in contemporary New York, so who needs us for that?
Well, it's also, you know, there's an exoticism to it, even if even if it's not romanticized or sentimental, as it's, you know, it's a once upon a time thing. That's interesting. And
also just where, as a setting, you know, the setting has some, I don't even know how to describe it, some emotional charge. Like you look at a cover of Freewheelin' and it says something to you, you know, and that, you know, you can use that. You can harness that, whatever power that has, which is really hard to verbalize, but it has some kind of power.
One of the things you get to do when you do a period movie is create a world for the camera. You have to create it in sort of globally and in every sort of little detail, which is actually a lot of fun. I mean, one of the fun things that we did in connection with this movie is there are album covers you see in the movie, and doing research about those and looking at a lot of them and trying to imagine internalizing those sort of design ideas and just the spirit of those things and making them yourself. It's fun. I mean, it's part of the pleasure of making movies is doing that sort of thing. And when it's a period movie, it's a different kind of pleasure than specific to that than if you're doing a contemporary film.
And it's just somehow, I don't know, it's a different way of saying the same thing. It's immediately transporting. You're going somewhere.
This movie was not based on an actual crime.
Who says?
Was it?
Yeah. Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
And this story is completely based on a real event.
Yeah, the story is the characters. You know, we weren't interested in making a documentary, and the characters are really inventions based on the sort of outline of events.
Yeah.
So we invented the characters, and they're really sort of our creation and the creation of the actors who played the parts.
Has your style changed over time, do you think?
You know, it's such a funny question about style, a vexed question, because you don't really think about style. You just, certainly I'm not saying something doesn't emerge that you can identify as that, but you don't think about it that way when you're making something so much. You just kind of think about what's appropriate to the scene or the piece as a whole, or you're always trying to find that kind of appropriate language is a good way of putting it. Someone said that earlier. And I think that just kind of emerges as a style. It's not a kind of premeditated thing. I think if it is premeditated, it might get a little, I don't know, it might get a little it would be self-conscious, you know? So if there's a style, in looking back, I don't know. It's harder for me to identify consistencies in style in terms of what I've done in the past from Blood Simple to this. You know, I look more at it, I look at it more in terms of you're on a kind of discovery for the right language for each of the things that you're doing. It's things of taste that emerge, you know, and the taste may be personal, and as you're looking for those things, that you keep reflecting your own taste, and that becomes an element of the style, I guess what you would call it. But I think the ambition is to say, I don't have a style. I'm just trying to do what's right for the material, right? I think that's the ambition. That's the way you want to feel about it.
With your actors, Josh and Scarlett have worked with you guys as well before. Are there actors that maybe you'll meet them or you know of them and you'll say, you know what, they would be great for not this project but the next one? You kind of have people in mind for subsequent projects as things go along?
Yeah, sometimes we tend to write a lot for specific actors, it's true, or the other way it works frequently is that we'll work with someone on a specific movie in a specific part and have a lot of fun with them, and then just start thinking about what else might be fun to see them play. So that can be the sort of beginning of a new project, or we're working on another project and we end up writing for that actor again.
But tell me more about your philosophy of making movies that reflected in what we just talked about.
Well, it is kind of what Josh says. We have a plan because we're chicken. You know, we don't want to have to go on.
You don't trust your actor? What?
No, not the actors.
Yeah.
But just in terms of being our own ability to extemporize on the set, or the obligation of extemporizing on the set. We don't want that. We want to have a plan for how we're going to shoot the scene, whatever it is. So we walk in with a plan, which, as Josh says, is always kind of subject to change. But, it's kind of a security blanket.
You know, the mythology about Alfred Hitchcock, in fact, he was the biggest promoter of it. Was that idea that, once I actually get on the set, the only thing that can happen is that something can go wrong. He's already made the movie in his head. And he also was sort of, very, very prepared to the extent of having pre-thought the movie before he started production. We're not... I'm not even sure that's true of Alfred Hitchcock in reality. I don't think he could have made 50 movies without enjoying the process of being on the set and working with people. It's such an extremely social and collaborative process. While it's true that we prepare maybe to an extent greater than a lot of other directors, who, that's just part of our process, it's also true that we like the process on the set of actually seeing what happens, being open to what happens when you go into a new space, when you're working with new people, be they actors or technical people. And we do have storyboards, but actually we don't look at them very much while we're shooting. Mm-hmm. And once they've been done, we almost never look at the storyboards. We have them in the back of our minds and we follow them to a certain extent, but that changes a lot as we go through the production.
From a writing point of view, guys, obviously all of your films have got some humor in them, but something that like this, sort of along the lines of Intolerable Cruelty or Big Lebowski, is there a different process that you have to writing comedies, outright comedies like this, rather than things like No Country for Old Men or Inside Llewyn Davis?
Not really. No, you just sit down and try and make the story go. And sometimes they're comedies and sometimes they're not. But no, the process is really the same. I'd be hard-pressed to tell you what the process was on either of them, frankly, but it's just problem-solving, really.
Well, that monologue alone, I think, sent European film theorists and everything start seeing it as an anti-American commentary about the state of sort of late Cold War. I mean, did it entertain you when you started hearing some of these theories about it?
It happened a lot on, like, Barton Fink.
It happens a lot with, a lot of our movies. People want, like, I don't know why, like, people want social commentary and stuff. The story isn't enough for some people.
Maybe it's because because it's the only thing we know, we just write American stories, and some of them are regional stories, and we never kind of have gone outside of that. And so people think that there's some kind of larger political commentary about this country in it, or that that's part of the design of the movie, when it wasn't any part of the design of the movie.